beautiful souls. I'm back today to talk about the mirror effect because it is so useful in our personal transformation and moving through the density of the past and our experience in the 3D world. And yet it can be hard to grasp. It took me 2 years to really understand this concept. So I'm going to look at 4 aspects. What is the mirror effect? And I'm going to talk about quantum physics and research in the brain. Why is it important and how is it useful? How does it help us with ascension? And how do we practice and use the mirror effect? So I'll start with what it is. And basically it is the fact that everyone on the outside is showing us something that is within us. And so that's the very simple answer. And doing this can be simple, and yet it relates to quantum physics, which can go really deep. So I'll just take you down that rabbit hole for a minute, but know that you don't have to understand the quantum physics and really grasp how that works in order for you to implement the mirror effect in your life and receive the benefits of using what comes back to you on the outside as a way for you to transform yourself. So basically, quantum physics, when I wrote my book, Conversations with a Tree, I did a lot of research on science because I wanted people to understand that it's not so out there to be able to talk to a tree. And in part of this research, I came upon this piece about quantum physics that basically says that the pineal gland actually has the attributes of our physical eyeballs. It has cones and rods like an eyeball has. And I came to understand from my research that I'm sure you've all heard that the world is a stage. We create this reality. It's not as real and solid as it seems. And my understanding is that the way that we create this, it's almost like we create it with our imagination in our mind. And to me, the pineal gland, one of its functions is to be like a projector. It projects out based on our beliefs. This is a way to understand it. Based on our beliefs, we create this reality on the outside. Then we experience it with our physical eyes. We bring it back into our brain to be interpreted and think of it as something that is separate from ourselves, when in reality, we created it within ourselves. And part of this is that we connect with mass consciousness. We share belief systems within societies and within consciousness. It's like if you go to a whole different culture, you're in culture shock because you've not been living in a world that created that same belief system. But for everyone who lives there, it's very normal and there's no adjustment required whatsoever. And so this helps us to understand fundamentally that the reason the mirror effect, the reason that everything on the outside is showing us something within us is basically because we, in one way, have created everything that we see on the outside. And we're creating it from our belief systems, from our own understanding. And as I said, it's complicated to understand this. The more information you have, the more you can work with it. And the key is to really just be working with it. And as we get to the end of this video, hopefully it won't be too long, you should have a better understanding of how to start working with that and using this in your own life. And for me, it's been paramount in helping me move through my own limiting beliefs. It's also been very interesting with the freedom release technique that I created. So the clearing technique, where I'm able to go in for people and find out where their limiting beliefs were created. So we shift them at the very core of where they were created, it's very powerful and effective. Almost every client has come back for another session because they see the results of one session. And the reason that I get such great results with the freedom release technique is because we're going to the very core of where the belief was created. So I'm intuitively able to go in and see that. And what I found after I was doing this for a while is that everyone who was coming to me for a session either was showing me something that I still needed to clear, or was showing me something that I had already gone through in my own life. So basically, everyone who came to me was a mirror for me. It was profound when I realized this. For one thing, it made me realize the perfection of the universe, that everybody's just supporting us. We're supporting each other all the time. If we only knew that and understood that, everyone who makes us angry or gets us frustrated, they're actually a tool for us to go in and see our own limitations. And so I found it very interesting when I realized this. It helped me understand more fully the mirror effect and how it works. And it reminds me of Ho'oponopono. I don't know if you've heard of that technique out of Hawaii. And it was developed by a psychologist who was called to work in, I believe it was like an insane asylum, or like a prison for people with mental disorders and insanity. And the environment in that clinical, I can't remember if it was a prison or not, we'll call it a prison, was so toxic that they actually needed twice the amount of staff that they normally would have, because so much of their staff was out on sick leave because the environment was just hardly bearable. And this man, pardon me, who developed Ho'oponopono, would pull out someone's file, read their file, ask, where is that within me? And do the clearing work within himself. He did not see one person that was in that prison face to face. He pulled their file, asked where that was within himself, and cleared it with his technique of Ho'oponopono. And that was so effective. The prison became so much healthier that staff started coming back from sick leave and they were able to stay at work. Eventually, it was closed down because it was so successful they didn't need it anymore. That's a profound example of how the mirror effect works. Everything, and the reason he knew that he could clear it within himself was because he was in that environment where they were, so therefore there was something about them that was within him. So basically to say that everything in our environment is showing us something about ourselves. And it's not just the negative, it's the positive as well. Using negative and positive as words that we need for understanding. In the big picture, there is no negative and positive, but it's the language we use to help us understand. And I've, in my past, been very good at looking at what's wrong and not so good at allowing what's good or what's right or changes that I've made that are beneficial. I haven't been as good at celebrating those and recognizing that when good things come to me, it's like, oh, I've done this work. I've opened up. I've cleared all that old debris that was pulling, magnetizing negative things into my life. I've cleared so much of that away that now good things are coming into my life. And it took me a while to really start acknowledging that and recognizing that. And it's important that we do acknowledge that so that our subconscious knows we've made this accomplishment. Otherwise, it's just going to keep searching for what's wrong until we tell it, no, this isn't wrong. This is going great. And then it starts magnetizing more of that. But this comes from doing the clearing work of the dense 3D patterns, you could say, that we developed in our childhood and we brought from past lifetimes. There's a lot that we carry from past lifetimes that are still having an impact on us. I see that so much in my work. And clearing a past life can have a profound effect on what's happening for us right now. So, another aspect of this is when I talk about the pineal gland and its role, it was very interesting as well when I was doing this research. I think this came from Nassim Haramein, where he talked about someone having an accident, and they felt a brain injury in this accident, and so they had to do surgery. And this was a perfectly functioning person before they had this accident. And when they did the surgery on the brain, they discovered that this person, I may have these details a bit wrong, I'm going to say they discovered that this person had like a quarter of the brain mass that people usually have, and the rest of the brain cavity was filled with water. And this person functioned normally. They had memory like nobody would know or think that there was anything wrong with this person, that they didn't have a full functioning brain. So this really should make us ask, what is the function of the brain, and where is memory? Obviously, memory is not stored in all that mass in our brain if this person's brain was mostly water, although I do believe that water holds memory. But there is also other research that I discovered when I was writing Conversations with a Tree, done back some in the late 1800s, some I think it was in the 60s or 70s, and they started removing different parts of people's brains, not people, mice and rats, lab rats, to discover exactly where memory was in the brain. And what they found was that it didn't matter which part of the brain they removed, these rats would still be able to remember a maze, even if all the sections at one point or another had been removed from a rat's brain. They could still remember how to move through a maze. And then they started looking at quantum physics as well. And basically, the theory is that memory is stored in the field, and that our brain is like an antenna that processes and pulls in that memory from the field. And I share all this so that we know that we don't know everything. Things are not the way we have thought that they are. And to be open-minded as well about this pineal gland projecting our reality and our eyes bringing it in and then interpreting it. It's to be open-minded and know that there's so much that we've yet to discover, that quantum physics and other research that sadly gets hidden. There's a book, I can't remember the name right now, The Hidden Science. This fellow went into libraries, he was from Britain, and spent months and months in libraries looking at peer-reviewed research, and discovered all this fascinating research that had been totally kept hidden and suppressed. And I know from research as well done on trees by a university professor in Calgary, Alberta, where she did some research, and she showed in her research that plants have memory. She would drop plants from I think 3 stories onto foam, and it was the mimosa plant that would close up its leaves when it was threatened. So at first it would close its leaves, but then the plant remembered that, oh, I'm not going to be killed. There's a soft landing at the bottom, and it would stop closing its leaves when it was dropped. And 4 months later, they would bring that plant back after not dropping it for 4 months, and it would not close its leaves. And they thought, well, maybe it had been overstressed from the experiment and just couldn't close its leaves anymore. And then they would do something like clap their hands or something, and it would close its leaves because that was a different environment, and it responded protectively to that. So she proved that plants remembered, and they wouldn't publish her research as long as she said that plants had memory, and she refused not to say that plants have memory. So this is just an example of how profound research that could give us so much more understanding about our capabilities and the environment around us, and plants and trees and even seemingly inanimate objects, how this has been suppressed. So I'll get back to the mirror effect. Let me just check my notes. So one of the easiest ways to see what the mirror effect is that whenever we see something in someone else that we don't like, we can tend to project onto them and say they're so lazy, or they're so greedy, or they're so selfish. And the truth is, if they are in our experience, they're showing a shadow side of ourselves. And the shadow side is just the side that we don't want to see. It's hard for us to accept that if we don't like selfishness in someone else, that we have characteristics of selfish. We don't want to admit that. It's challenging to see that there are aspects of ourselves that are what we would consider unlikable, because we don't like people who are selfish. So therefore, it's like admitting that we don't like ourselves. It's a releasing happening whenever I sigh or yawn. And it's not that we don't like ourselves, it's that there's a piece of ourselves that if we were living our fullest potential, we would probably not be embodying that characteristic. But because of trauma and pain in the past and things we've been taught to believe about ourselves and things that society has taught us in general, we hold these characteristics that we don't like. And so that's one of the biggest effects of the mirroring, is that you can see in others what you don't like about yourself. And you can also see in others what you do like about yourself. When we admire someone, we see them doing things. For example, one time I was at a metaphysical conference, a fair in New York City, and there was a woman there who used sound. And I was really just beginning my journey with sound at that point. I wasn't embodying it as fully as I am now. And I heard her speak and do some toning, and it was just beautiful. And so later I went over to her booth, and she wasn't there. She had someone who was supporting her sitting behind the table. And I walked up to her booth, and I just looked on the wall at her promotional material, and I burst into tears. And I knew it was because there was something within me that recognized that what she was doing was in me as well, but I wasn't living up to it. So it works both ways. The beauty in us that we're not fully living up to, and the shadow in us that we really don't want to admit to. That's how the shadow effect works. And in the aspect of that person who tones, it can really show us then in that case, wow, if this touches me so deeply, obviously this is something within me that really wants to come forward, and we can give it more attention. And the shadow piece, the reason that is so important is because we live in our pain and our trauma until we see fully what it is and allow ourselves to go in and dig it out and process it. The processing can be fairly easy, but we have to do it. Until we do that, we're not going to get to the other side of moving beyond the suffering. So it also causes reaction within us. So fear, disassociation, running, that's all trying to avoid the shadow within us. One of my patterns for most of my life was to run. So I would always rise above. That's okay. This person's treating me like this. I'm just going to be the good person. I'm just going to rise above. I was very much a martyr. Didn't even realize it at the time. I have moved from the time I was 19 until even now. The longest I've lived in one place has been 3 years, even when raising my children. Most times it was once every year. Profound, ridiculous, like most people would just not be able to do that. That was my way of running from my life. And it's only since I moved to Vancouver Island and this land just rocked me and brought me back into myself and forced me to go in and look that things have transformed so significantly for me. I started in 2012. I dedicated that year to healing, and I started doing a lot of clearing work in that year. It was really a profound year for me. And it's taken all this time to really dig through. The energy is faster now. There's so much more high vibration energy available to us now. So I'm not saying that it's going to take you this long, but I do know that we all need to go in and do this work. It can shift quickly, and we'll know when it's shifted. We'll know when we have ease and grace within ourselves, and we're in a state of peace, and we accept what's on the outside without being ruffled at all. It's like, oh, look at this that's happening right now. Isn't that interesting? I wonder what this is showing me. And we just go in and we find out, and we are present with it. It doesn't create fear or suffering. So all these methods that we use to disassociate, to run from life, trying to make it better by running away, these are all showing us that there are shadow aspects within ourself that we're avoiding. And the mirror effect can be a very powerful way for us to really discover what that is. And so, like I said, it shows up on the outside world in people, in the workplace, it can be our children, our partners, it can be our family. Of course, that's the greatest trigger. And in all honesty, I think sometimes some people need to really disconnect from their family in order to do this work. Because if we're being triggered all the time, it's hard to step back and get a different perspective and do this work and find those shadows. So if you're someone who feels like you need to pull back from your family a bit in order to do healing, don't feel bad about that. That's whatever you need to do, in order for you to come to your homeostasis, your peace within. You're serving everybody by coming to that state. So please allow yourself whatever you need to be able to do that. So that's a very basis of what the mirror effect is. And why is it important or useful? So I've touched on that. It's really useful because we're always seeing what the world wants us to see. Our higher self is really guiding us in this life experience and bringing things into our life experience for us to see and learn from all the time. And so, as I said, it can be people in our lives that are showing us. It can be animals that come into our experience. Animal medicine is always showing us things. Life is always showing us. And when we get to see what this is, we can really start clearing the pain from the past. So that's one of the great benefits, because that pain creates suffering. If you're always running yesterday's conversations through your head, to me, that's suffering. We don't need to be doing that. I don't do that anymore. And the way we get to that place of moving into stillness is by digging in and finding those shadows and releasing them, because they are what creates those beliefs that, oh, we didn't say the right thing, or we were too mean, or they don't like us, so I must be this. You know, we need to get back to the place of self-love. And to do that, that love is within each and every one of us. I like to say we have to cover up all the debris that's over our light. So it's as if there's this spark of light within our heart, and all this dirt's been thrown over it through all our life experiences, and we have to dig up that dirt and find our way back to that spark. It also keeps us from ascending. These old belief patterns and limiting patterns are heavier energy. They are a denser energy than the ascension energy. So when we're holding that heavy energy, it keeps us from ascending. It holds us down. And so the more we clear, literally, the lighter, both figuratively and literally, we become. We become lighter of spirit. We feel happier. And we become lighter because we're less burdened with these old patterns and thoughts and belief systems that keep resurfacing and holding us back. They are holding us back. If we keep repeating the past, expecting things to be the way they were yesterday, because these beliefs keep that cycle running within us, we're not going to shift and change and move into a new experience, what some would call the new earth. To me, the new earth is just really living a new experience within ourselves. And because we create our reality from our belief systems, then I'm living a different reality than someone who still has a lot of pain and suffering from their belief systems. We're really living in two different worlds, even though we might be across each other on the street, you could say. And it also causes us to react in life. So if we spontaneously, jump at someone, or get angry at someone, or blame someone, or blame ourselves and get quiet on the inside and retreat, these are all reactions that are coming from our shadow beliefs and our shadow patterns, and they can be so deeply hidden within the subconscious. People have no idea. I teach this in a workshop that I've developed called Discover Your Light. And I teach this mirror work and the shadow effect. And I've had people in this workshop, we pair up and people discuss it and help each other find it, who haven't been able to find it. And sometimes it takes a bit of a flip to see it, but it's so deeply buried in the subconscious because we dislike that aspect so much in others that it's very difficult to admit that we have it within ourselves. And yet, it can be in a way that's not as bad as we think, but it's there, and it needs to come out so that we can be free from the opposite of what that is. And so the only way for life to change is for you to change. As we know, you can't change someone else, you can only change yourself. And the beauty is, what most people don't talk about, is that when you change yourself, people in your environment change immediately. I recently had the experience of that, where I recognized something within myself and asked someone to support me with it in my relationship with my daughter. And she was very helpful in doing this work with me, and immediately I felt the difference within myself, and of course saw the difference in my relationship with her. It wasn't her that changed, it was me. And it's because I have to respond. If you and I are in relationship, I have to respond to your belief system, because your belief system is creating me. And I have a very powerful example of that. I was in partnership with a person at one time whose first wife had left him for someone else. And when we were together, I suddenly got this feeling that I was going to cheat on him. And it's not in my character at all. I just would not do that. But I had this really strong feeling that I was going to cheat on him, and I wasn't anybody else I was interested in. It was just kind of bizarre to be having this feeling. And then I recognized, oh, he's expecting that I'm going to do the same thing that his former wife had done and cheat on him. And his expectation was so strong that I was starting to pick up on it, almost to the point where I was feeling like I would do it, even though it was so out of character for me. I didn't. I left the relationship because it didn't work out for us, but that's just an example of how you are creating your reality and I have to live up to your reality. And that's another way to see how the mirror effect is a reflection of our own beliefs. And I believe this is how Jesus healed. I believe that he, of course, was of such pure love and light that whoever stood in his presence, all he saw within them was pure love and light, healed, perfect, divine in every way. And people had to be that in his presence. And his consciousness was so strong that people would instantly have healings because they were instantly becoming the person that he saw them as. So that's an example of how powerful this really becomes for us once we learn how to work with it and start integrating it into our lives. So the third question, how does it help with ascension? Well, to ascend, we really must do our internal work because, again, when we're weighted down with our baggage, you could say, from the past, not only can we not move on in our own lives, so for example, you may attract relationships where the person can't be fully present for you, and you just keep attracting new people that have the same characteristic. We can't move out of that pattern of attracting relationships like that until we do our internal work that's magnetizing those kind of people. Once you go in and you see why you've been doing that, then suddenly you can start attracting people who are fully present, fully open-hearted for you, but not until your own heart is open. You can't attract someone who's totally available to love, which means their heart is open to loving you, if your heart isn't open to loving you, because that's the mirror. It's not until we can fully love ourselves that we can attract someone who can fully love us in return, and we can fully love them. So, it's releasing the dense, low vibrating energies that we really need to let go of before we're going to be in resonance with the higher vibration energies that are connected to the ascension. We have to meet the vibration of the ascension energies, and it requires a lot of clearing and releasing in order to do that. And the more you clear, the more you see your life choices change. So for example, I'm a type O blood type, which is, they call it the caveman diet if you have experienced the 4 blood types. For me, when I used to eat according to my blood type, I felt much better. And it requires a lot of meat, traditionally, the type O blood type. And I became a vegetarian a year ago. And I didn't just sit down one day and say, oh, eating meat is bad, I'm going to become a vegetarian. I just found that I was wanting to eat less and less meat. I just found myself automatically making different choices with food. Like, for example, years before that I stopped eating bananas. I just had this feeling within myself that bananas are not good for us. I still believe that's true. I don't know if they're GMO or what it is, but there's something. And so I just trust my body in this. But what I know now, I've been a vegetarian for a year, and it's not been an easy journey for me. I've had low iron and had to do a lot of work with that and other aspects of having a balanced diet that have been challenging for me. And as one of my friends said, I think you're in a bit of a dichotomy because it's like your body wants meat, but your mind doesn't want meat. So I figured it out. I found a really good iron supplement, and I'm able to do this. And I realize now that part of that was my vibration changing. And I'm not judging people who eat meat. Like I say, I just became a vegetarian a year ago. I have no judgment around this whatsoever. But what I've recognized within myself, just a few months ago, I was feeling like I needed a boost of iron. And so I had some fish. I bought some Arctic char, so wild fish. And I had one piece one night and didn't sleep very well that night. Didn't really make a connection until 2 days later I had the other piece of fish and had the same experience that night. And I realized there's just a density in that food that was impacting me. And I realized that the reason I chose to become a vegetarian is because my vibration is higher, and the way meat is processed in our world, animals are no longer killed with dignity or respect or honor, the way the First Nations people, for example, would hunt and honor and bless the animal for having given itself to give them life, and make sure they used all the meat and it was killed in a humane way, as humane as killing can be. We no longer do that, so there's a lot of density in meat that we eat and in most of the food, processed food. And so as my vibration rose, I made different choices. And that's another thing that you start to see, is the outside world changing as you change on the inside. My choices are changing. I've given up coffee just recently. That was more like I knew my higher guidance was wanting me to give up coffee. And the truth is, coffee lowers our vibration. I learned that from Young Living Essential Oils many years ago. They did a lot of research on the vibration of their oils and the vibration of the physical body, and how essential oils can impact the physical body and raise our vibration, and also showed that coffee lowers our vibration, and even smelling coffee can lower our vibration. But I loved coffee, so it took me a while to do that, but I've given up coffee now, and I know they want me to give up caffeine altogether and not even have tea, but I'm not there yet, so I just keep working on it as it goes. But as we raise our vibration, things start to shift internally as well. And all these are leading us toward ascension. So this is how it really does help us with ascension. And so in the last piece about how do we practice and clear using the mirror effect, I think a lot of you will know the saying from the fairy tale Snow White, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" I like to say, "Mirror, mirror at my side, show me things I like to hide." And basically what that's saying is that everybody who's here, everything in my environment is showing me something within myself. If my environment is clear and organized, I have great clarity. If my environment's getting cluttered, which it does because I'm a very creative person, so I can have 4 things on the go at once, I start to get cluttered in my mind and lose that clarity. And, I'll have to just put everything away and then start over and just work on one thing at a time. So even that way, our environment is showing us what's going on in the inside. So, one of the best ways to work on the mirroring effect is to look at what we don't like about someone else. And think about someone who gets under your skin. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's someone that you don't know, but someone who's well known. And do the challenging work of just saying, okay, where is that within me? And really let yourself be present with it. So let's say it's someone who is really selfish and greedy, and you consider yourself to be a kind and generous person, and you really hate this person because they're so greedy and they're so selfish. And so you have to ask yourself, where am I greedy and selfish? And it can be, as I've said, it can be difficult and challenging to find that. And it could be that somewhere you're greedy and selfish with yourself. It could be that you're so against selfishness that you overgive and you give to people all the time and you never say no. And whenever somebody asks, you're right there to do it because you don't want to be seen as selfish, because you hate selfishness, and therefore you're selfish with yourself because you're not giving yourself the time and the space that you need to have a life of ease and just to have some downtime for yourself. This can be an example of how we find that mirror. So just look at people anytime a situation, an event. There are politicians that I know people love to hate the politicians, and maybe it's harder to find it there. So start looking with someone that's closer to you. Perhaps it's a sibling, and just say, okay, what is it about them that really gets under my skin, that really bothers me? Perhaps it's a parent, and just really taking the time and sitting with it. And you can ask your friends, like if you're willing to do this work and dig in and find out what it is, you can say to your friends, I've noticed that I don't like this characteristic in people. And whenever I see it, I find myself being really turned off by that person. And I feel that there's probably that characteristic within me and I can't find it. Do you see that within me anywhere? Friends, people from the outside, it's much easier to see from the outside than it is when we're here. It's so close to us and it's so deeply hidden, and it's so hard to admit that we have this shadow aspect of ourselves that we just don't want to see. And so be prepared to hear the answer and be gentle with yourself when you're doing this. Don't use this as an opportunity to punish yourself and beat yourself up because you have this quality. That is totally what this is not about. We all have qualities that are not who we would choose to be. And it's really important to understand that the reason they are there is because we had to protect ourselves when we were growing up. And we as children aren't even fully cognizant till they're 8 years old. They're not even able to reason until they're 8 years old. So when things happen to us in those formative years between 1 and 7, or birth and 7, even in the womb, we develop coping strategies that have no logic to them, and then they just become so implanted and part of our being. We use them for survival. So these techniques, these hidden shadow beliefs, they're there because we needed to survive. So it makes no sense to be hard on ourselves because they're there. We need to be generous to them and love them and thank them for helping us to get through what was difficult situations for us. We can thank them for that and tell them that they don't need to be there anymore. We have a new perspective now. We understand. We can look after ourselves and just keep going in, being kind to yourself as you find them. If a friend says, I've seen this in you, don't be upset with that friend. And if it hurts and if it makes you want to cry, go ahead and cry. Let yourself feel that. Let yourself feel, wow, like I thought this shadow was so awful that I don't even like myself for having it. How sad is that? Just let yourself feel that sadness and be present with that. It's okay that it makes you sad that you had that. You don't understand how it was needed and how it supported you. But as a grown-up adult who's choosing to ascend, who's choosing to raise yourself up in vibration and create a new reality for yourself, it doesn't serve you any longer. So you can thank it for when it did serve you and all the service that it gave you, and just let it know it's not serving you anymore, and start to have more compassion for people who you see as selfish. Now you know why they're selfish. They're protecting themselves and they're still doing it. They just haven't learned that they can let it go and that life can be different and that it's safe to be in the world. It is a crazy world out there. If you just look from a perspective of what you see, it doesn't serve us to look at that and focus on that. But it can give us compassion for people who don't know that, for people who don't know that they're creating their reality and they think the world's falling apart. We create our own world. We can't fix the outside world. We can't make it better for everyone else. The only thing we can do in that regard is to make our world better, because then we are one more person who's living in this world from a place of peace and stillness and a healed heart, so our life can shine. That's the greatest service that we can give to this earth, because the earth needs all of us to be there. And anyone watching this video, you've come to be this. I know you have. You've come to uncover your light, let it shine brightly, and be all that you can be. So thank you so much for staying. I know this was a long video, and I would be happy to support you in this journey with the Freedom Release Technique. You can learn about it below, do some exploring on my website if you're interested. And remember to be loving and kind to yourself in every moment. That's what's most important. And the more we do this for ourselves, the more love and kindness we have for the world outside of us, because we're creating loving kindness in the world outside of us, because we've created it within yourself. So, mirror, mirror at my side, show me things I like to hide. And I should add to that, for the things that we like to see, Mirror, mirror, as I see, show me things I'm happy to be. Just made that up. That might change. Okay, lots of love to you all. Bye-bye.